Do you know, Ben Hogan once said that a set of golf clubs should look like a fine piece of jewellery. Well, in today's video, we're going to have a little look at their range. Now, this isn't the full Ben Hogan lineup because there's a couple of other models that I've done some testing on, but I've chosen these three because they're kind of moving from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum when it comes to player performance to then maybe game improvement performance. So let's take a closer look at what Ben Hogan have to offer from their direct-to-consumer lineup. Now, the first one up is going to be the Ben Hogan Legend iron, which is a hollow body construction iron. It's filled up with foam. We'll get onto the reasons why that is. But this is ideally their kind of game improvement lineup. Slightly bigger in its profile, which is going to give lots of players lots of confidence. But from a visuals down by the ball, I mean, it actually looks very similar to a lot of their other lineups, which is a clean looking club down by the ball. Now visually, when you look at the back of the club, it looks a little bit like a blade. But to be fair, a lot of hollow body construction irons do look like blades because ultimately what they've done is they've taken out all the weight from the kind of midsection of the club and put it around the perimeter of the club. This is going to give us that stability with those off-centered strikes. If you get the weight around the perimeter, it means that we're going to get a little bit less twisting. And ultimately, from their point of view, they're focusing on maintaining ball speeds with those off-centered strikes. And I talked about the foam that's inside the head, and you can see a little kind of screw there where the foam would be injected inside. The idea of this is to try and get a bit of feel into the head, because when you're taking a club which is hollow body in its construction, you're going to get a lot of flexing off the face. You're going to get a lot of tinging noises like you would, let's say, with a wood. So they're trying to get control of that and make it feel and sound just like another iron on the market. Now, I've got to say, when I've picked up game improvement irons in the past, and they call them game improvement because they're there to help, this is what they're all about, and they always focus on the higher handicap golfer, which I don't really always agree with because, you know, there's low handicap golfers out there that need a little bit of help as well, and that help comes from that perimeter weighting, that stability on the head. Now, the other thing that you're going to notice when you look down at a game improvement iron is you generally see a club with lots of offset, which can put off, I would say, better players. They want to see something that's a little bit more onset. That offset is to help. It's to help square the club face up as you come through into impact, which ultimately gets the ball moving towards your intended target. However, with this lineup, the Legend lineup, I'm not seeing a great deal of offset on it. It certainly doesn't look chunky down by the ball. There is a slightly thicker top line than, let's say, the other lineups, but visually, like I said earlier, it just looks, it really, really looks classy, which means that you could probably combo this set quite nicely with some other products in their lineup. And you can see from that shot over there, which actually pretty much got to my intended target and pretty much online, I actually struck that a little bit out of the toe, which probably from, let's say, a set of irons that I would use, if I get one a little bit out the toe, I lose a lot of ball speed. I don't necessarily get to my kind of intended target, but with that shot there, it performed really well and still got to where I was kind of aiming towards. Now, from a spin point of view, I got 5,500 revs out of that particular shot, and I got a launch of around 18.4 degrees, certainly off the club face, which means to me that I'm a little bit low on that spin, but I'd expect to get that from those game improvement irons. They're a little bit stronger in their loft, which is going to help get that ball out there just a little bit further. But at 18.4 degrees of a launch angle, I'm really happy with that. I'm always looking for something around 18 or 19, which is going to give me that optimal performance coming into the greens. And the last thing to mention, which runs right the way through the three clubs that I've got out here today, is the V sole. Now, with the Legend, the sole on this one is going to play a little bit thicker than the other two that I'm about to show you, but that V sole is designed to help with the performance of the club going in and out of the turf. You don't want something bouncing off the surface, but you don't want something digging in too much. So the idea of the V sole is to help with that performance, that turf interaction, which you've probably heard. But now we're moving into this little baby, which looks slightly different to what we're seeing out of the Legend, but it's got that little bit of cavity back on it. Let's take a closer look. And it's called the M5001 iron. It's very much a cavity back iron. And I kind of look at this as the next one kind of up from, let's say, or down, whatever you want to say, from that Legend iron. Where we've got that hollow body construction, it's almost like we've taken the back off the Legend iron and it's exposed what's kind of happening under the hood, should we say. Ben Hogan with a little bit of forge, nice little bit of detailing, and the top line on it, very, very similar to what I was seeing out of the Legend iron. But what is slightly different with this one, and I'll show you in just a moment, is this little white streak at the bottom there, filling in that bottom groove, which makes it really easy to line up to my intended target. So what you saw from that particular shot there being a little bit on the clean side, so I called it a little bit thin, and I feel like I lost a fraction of ball speed, just a little bit of ball speed from that shot in comparison to what I would have got from the Legend iron. So even though this is a cavity back iron, again, taking a lump of that metal out the back there, putting it around the perimeters, trying to help with stability. When you start to move into sort of more players' irons, should we call it, you're going to start to really notice it when you do miss-hit it. However, this particular lineup, giving us that little bit of help, but again, slightly different to what we're seeing in the Legend iron. Now, as I said, from a visual point of view, when you set up behind that ball, that little white streak there, I've seen this in ping irons more so than any other iron on the market, making it really easy to line up to your intended target there. But as I said, slightly different to what we're seeing out of that Legend iron, slightly thinner in that sole, when you set it up onto the ground, which again is just what different players want to feel. If you're a player that tends to dig down in the ball, then you're going to want a little bit more help when it comes to that sole. If you're a player that kind of sweeps it a little bit more, then you want that sole to just feel like it's maybe just a little bit smaller, which again is going to help with that turf interaction. So a slightly more compact head is ultimately what you're getting from this particular lineup. Now, from a spin point of view, I got an extra 250 revs more spin out of this iron than I did, let's say, the Legend iron. And the more spin you have, the more generally I always think control you're going to get. Remember, when you're out on the golf course, the grass and the wet conditions are going to take that spin away from the head. Therefore, you're going to lose a little bit of spin compared to what I'm, let's say, getting in here, and therefore lose a little bit of control. So the more spin you can have from a forged head like this one, in my view, the better. Ultimately, if you take that spin away, you're going to get a little bit more distance. Launch-wise, pretty much the same at 18 degrees in launch, and all in all, a great feel from the face, which is what you would expect with a nice forged iron like this one. Not a bad shot either. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we talked about jewellery. Well, look at this little bad boy. Now, this isn't going to be for the masses, and if I put this video out on its own, as sexy as it looks, it probably wouldn't get that many views. And the reason for that is because a bladed iron, an MB muscle back iron like we've got here, isn't going to be for the masses. It's going to be for a very small proportion of golfers out there. For players that want absolute control, absolute precision when it comes to controlling ball flight, then they're going to be looking at an iron like this. It's tiny in its profile compared to the other two that we've tested here today. But from a visual point of view, I don't think it gets much better than this MB. And it's called the Fort Worth MB. Now, I'm somebody that have used in the past and have got in the bag right now a set of MB irons. So for me, this is like a little bit being at home. However, in comparison to the MBs that I use, this is slightly bigger in its profile. Not masses, but slightly bigger. And you've got to remember, for players that are looking to put an MB in the bag, they're probably looking for something a little bit smaller in their profile. And I always think like aim small, miss small. So if you can sort of line up behind the ball, as long as you've got that club pretty much making contact with the ball, you're pretty much going to find the middle of this club. But visually, it does not, honestly, it does not get much better to my eye than this Fort Worth MB iron. Now, from a spin point of view, and we talked about the control, even though I've leaked that a little bit on the right-hand side there, the numbers that I'm seeing from this Fort Worth MB, remember we were sort of 5,500 revs out of that Legend, then we moved up to 5,750 revs. Well, now we're moving a little bit higher again. If I look at the numbers we've got here, a 21-degree launch angle compared to 18 that we got out of the others, but this one now spinning at 6,500 revs, which for me personally, I'm kind of looking for an iron. If I look at the bottom number, like 7 iron that I'm hitting here now, if I can times that number by 1,000 and give or take 500 revs either side of that, then I would say that that is a perfect setup for someone like me or what I'm looking for. Now, some people want slightly different. Some people want a little bit more spin. Some people want less spin, depending on their swing speed. But for me personally, looking for that control, we're definitely going to see it from this MB. Now, historically, when you looked at an MB, you wouldn't see a great deal of technology in it because ultimately it's just a lump of metal that's been beautifully forged into something that looks really quite nice, certainly on the shelf. However, we've got some tech in this Fort Worth MB, and it's called CMC, Ceramic Matrix Core, which is ultimately there and designed to be able to work with each head. Now remember, what we're looking for is a center of gravity point in each head that's going to give us that optimal performance. You know, you want your longer irons to be able to launch up in the air a little bit easier. You want to be able to control your shorter irons by keeping them down a fraction more. So by putting this technology inside the head, it gives me the CG in the right space for each iron, depending on what's written on the bottom, that's going to give me my optimal flight. And as you would expect from an MB iron, the feel off the face, well, that word buttery comes up quite a lot, doesn't it? But we've definitely got a softer feel coming out of this particular iron. It's not a great deal difference from the other two, to be honest with you, but it's definitely a sense there that I've got that softer center when I get it out in the middle. So there you go. There's 3 of the products that Ben Hogan have to offer. And I chose these 3 because I think they cover pretty much every golfer out there on the market. We've got that game improvement iron there with that Legend iron, which looks fantastic, but has that little bit of forgiveness and going to get it out there with a little bit more power. If you're looking for something that kind of sits in between there, you want that little bit of help, but then maybe you just want a slightly more spinnier head that's going to give you a little bit more control, then the M5001 is probably going to work really nicely for you. It looks great as well down by the ball. However, if you are somebody that wants ultimate, let's call it performance, ultimate control that you can control, then the Fort Worth MB is going to tick the box for you. Like I said, he wanted something that looked like jewelry in your golf bag, and I think we've pretty much got it with this lineup. Don't forget, if you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, but I'd like to hear down in the comments, have you ever tested the Ben Hogan irons, and do they work for your game?